The Forgotten Dawn, Humanity's Lost Origins and a Cycle of Memory. Humanity's story, as told through modern textbooks, begins with a simple narrative, a slow ascent from primitive hunter-gatherers to the builders of cities and empires. Yet, beneath the comforting rhythm of that tale lies an unsettling possibility, that we have mistaken the ruins of our own forgotten past for the debris of chance. For centuries, archaeologists have pieced together the shards of human history, yet the pattern they've arranged might be only a fragment of something far grander, older, and more complex than our current understanding allows. The prevailing view holds that civilization began around 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, where writing, agriculture, and cities first took root. But this timeline, tidy, linear, and comforting, crumbles when confronted with the unyielding evidence of sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a stone temple complex dated to nearly 12,000 years ago. The precision of its astronomical alignments, the sophistication of its carvings, and the sheer scale of its construction suggest not a scattered band of foragers, but a people who possess deep knowledge, organization, and purpose. And yet, this site predates the supposed birth of civilization by half an age. Such contradictions are not anomalies, they are echoes. The pyramids of Egypt, the megaliths of Baalbek, the mysterious city of Nan Madol, the perfectly fitted stones of Sacsayhuaman, all whisper of a lost chapter in humanity's book. The orthodoxy often dismisses these structures as the work of local ingenuity within isolated timelines, but their shared traits, geometric precision, astronomical alignment, and inexplicable engineering, hint at a forgotten source of knowledge that spanned oceans and epochs. It is as if these ancient builders remembered something we have long since lost. The idea that we are a civilization with amnesia is not one born of fantasy, but of humility. Catastrophes shape memory. If a great cataclysm swept across the world, an event like the Younger Dryas, when Earth was plunged into sudden, violent climate change around 12,800 years ago, entire societies could vanish almost overnight. Flood myths, carved in stone and preserved in oral traditions from Sumer to the Andes, all speak of a deluge of gods or survivors who carried the seeds of knowledge through the storm. Perhaps these gods were not divine at all, but the last survivors of an earlier age of humanity. Science, for all its rigor, is also vulnerable to comfort. Paradigms form and harden. When evidence arises that does not fit the model, it is often pushed aside or reinterpreted until it does. Skepticism, once the shield of inquiry, can become the prison of imagination. The history of science itself is a cycle of such corrections. Copernicus, Darwin, Einstein, all faced the inertia of certainty. It is not beyond reason to think our understanding of human origins might one day undergo a similar revolution. What makes this possibility most haunting is not merely the existence of ancient ruins, but their implication. If civilization rose before the flood, it fell, and with it, so too did memory. Our myths, our religions, even our scientific curiosity may be faint echoes of that earlier world's wisdom. We may not be the first to map the stars, to measure time, or to dream of immortality. We may only be remembering. In this light, every stone monument becomes a message, every forgotten site a library without its language. Archaeology, then, is less an act of discovery than of remembrance. To uncover the past is to rediscover ourselves, to remember who we were before the waters came, before the stories were reduced to myth, before we forgot. And so the question remains, what if humanity did not rise once, but twice? What if our first dawn was long before the one we remember, and we are only now waking from the longest night of all? The answer may lie buried not only beneath the earth, but within us, waiting to be remembered. For decades, the academic consensus has maintained that civilization's rise was a slow, methodical process, sparked only once humans learned to farm and settle in stable communities. Yet, beneath layers of ice and sediment, a growing chorus of discoveries hints at something far older, a global civilization that thrived before the last ice age ended, one erased so completely that only its monuments and myths remain. If true, it would mean that humanity's first great chapter was drowned not by time, but by water. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth entered the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden cooling that lasted over a millennium. Ice cores from Greenland reveal that global temperatures plummeted in mere decades. Species vanished. Glaciers surged. Something catastrophic had struck the planet. Some scientists, such as those studying the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggest that fragments of a massive comet may have collided with the northern ice sheets, igniting continent-spanning wildfires and releasing torrents of meltwater. Oceans rose. Rivers swelled. The world changed overnight. To a civilization unprepared for such violence, it would have been the end of everything. Ancient traditions seem to remember this apocalypse. The Sumerians spoke of a great flood sent by the gods. The Egyptians told of Tepi, the first time, an age before recorded history when gods ruled upon the earth. The Mayans and Aztecs described cyclical destructions of worlds, each followed by renewal. In the Andes, legends of Viracocha, a bearded teacher who emerged from the sea after a flood to rebuild humanity, echo across generations. Even in distant Aboriginal and Polynesian lore, we hear of drowned lands and survivors guided by stars. These are not isolated coincidences, they are fragments of a common memory. Archaeologists often interpret these stories as allegory, tales told to explain natural cycles or moral truths. But what if they were historical records, mythologized through time? What if the gods, who restored knowledge, were the last survivors of an advanced culture, engineers, astronomers, healers, passing on fragments of their science to a world reduced to ashes? Göbekli Tepe's builders, who emerged almost immediately after this cataclysm, might not have invented civilization, they may have been rebuilding it from memory. This view challenges not only archaeology, but our sense of human continuity. If an Ice Age civilization existed, where are its cities, its artifacts, its technologies? The answer may lie beneath the seas. At the end of the Ice Age, when the glacier melted, sea levels rose over 400 feet, drowning vast stretches of habitable land. Entire coastlines disappeared. Recent sonar mapping has revealed submerged ruins off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Caribbean, structures aligned in geometric patterns, far older than local traditions can explain. Each discovery adds weight to the idea that civilization's cradle may not have been a single fertile valley, but a series of coastal centers now lost to the depths. The ocean is our greatest vault of memory, and our greatest mystery. Beneath it may lie the remnants of ancient ports, temples, or even maps of the stars. Yet, most of the sea floor remains unexplored, the pages of that ancient story unread. As our technology improves, through underwater lidar, deep-sea drones, and advanced satellite imaging, we may soon uncover the undeniable evidence that we are not the first to build, to chart, to dream. But such revelations would upend everything. If an earlier civilization existed, it means that knowledge can be lost as easily as it is gained, that human progress is not a straight line, but a cycle of awakening and forgetting. We may not be the pinnacle of our species' achievement, but the latest in a long series of forgotten dawns. The very idea humbles us, reminding us that the ruins we dig up may not be relics of strangers, but reflections of our own forgotten selves. Perhaps that is why these truths remain buried, not by conspiracy, but by time, fear, and the arrogance of certainty. To admit that we once knew more than we do now is to confront our fragility. Yet it is only through such confrontation that we can begin to remember. The flood may have washed away our ancestors' cities, but not their whispers. The clues are there, in stone, in myth, in stars, and they are calling to be heard once more. When the ice collapsed and the seas rose, humanity fractured into memory and myth. Across the globe, those who survived the cataclysm became wanderers on a ravaged earth. They carried fragments of language, shards of knowledge, and a fire of remembrance that flickered weakly against the night of forgetting. It is within their footsteps that the legends of gods, teachers, and builders first emerged, echoes of a lost world where understanding once reached for the stars. The world that rose after the flood was unrecognizable. Forests reclaimed plains, coastlines vanished, and once vast river valleys became ocean floors. For the scattered survivors, survival itself became sacred. But among them, there were a few who remembered. They spoke of the skies, of celestial cycles, of the stars as maps guiding them across the endless waters. They remembered the geometry of the heavens and how the rhythms of the earth could be measured by the movement of the sun and moon. These were not mere myths, they were remnants of science, preserved in oral form until stone could speak for them again. From these bearers of memory came the legends of culture bringers, figures who appear, uncannily, in nearly every ancient tradition. In Egypt, there was Thoth, the scribe of the gods, said to have taught writing, astronomy, and law. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, descended from the sky to teach agriculture and mathematics before vanishing across the sea. In the Andes, Viracocha walked among the mountains, teaching the people how to build and heal before departing across the Pacific. And in Mesopotamia, Oannes, a half-man, half-fish being, emerged from the waters to share the secrets of civilization with humanity. Were these gods, or were they survivors, custodians of an earlier world's wisdom? If one strips away the divine embellishments and sees these tales through the lens of history rather than religion, a startling pattern emerges. Each god is described as an advanced being, teacher, astronomer, builder, who appeared suddenly after a global upheaval, gave humanity the tools of civilization, then disappeared. Their gifts, architecture, measurement, writing, agriculture, arrived not gradually, but explosively. These are the fingerprints of remembrance. A civilization does not crawl toward geometry or astronomy, it inherits them from memory. The remnants of these ancient teachers may still lie hidden beneath the monuments they inspired. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned precisely to the cardinal points and to the constellation of Orion's belt, a cosmic signature mirrored in the pyramids of Teotihuacan half a world away. Or the Temple of the Sun at Tiwanaku, aligned to the solstices with mathematical precision. These were not coincidences, nor simple acts of imitation. They were expressions of a shared inheritance, a memory encoded in stone. Archaeologists often attribute these alignments to ritual or chance. But what if they were remnants of a celestial science, an effort to preserve astronomical knowledge that predated the flood? The precession of the equinoxes, for instance, was known to ancient civilizations, though it takes nearly 26,000 years to complete one full cycle. How could this knowledge exist unless it was observed and recorded far earlier than we believe possible? Across continents, symbols repeat like an ancient chorus: the serpent, the spiral, the sun. These were not mere decorations but languages of memory. The serpent represented rebirth and knowledge, perhaps a metaphor for a civilization rising anew after destruction. The spiral, seen in the petroglyphs of the Americas and the stones of Europe, mirrors the galaxy's motion, a cosmic fingerprint that suggests a far-reaching understanding of the universe. These shared symbols are the vocabulary of survival, the way one age whispers to the next. But over generations, memory turned to myth. The teachers became gods, their machines became miracles, their instructions turned into rituals. The survivors' descendants revered what they no longer understood. Knowledge calcified into dogma, and the light of the old world dimmed beneath the weight of new ignorance. Humanity forgot not only its past but its own potential. And yet, even through millennia of forgetting, something endured. A pattern. A whisper. A sense that we have been here before, that the rise and fall of civilizations is not progress, but rhythm. Perhaps, as Graham Hancock once suggested, humanity is not the first advanced civilization to walk this earth. We are only the latest, children of survivors who once watched their world burn, who tried desperately to leave us a message carved in the language of eternity. Some of those messages are still waiting. Beneath jungles, beneath deserts, beneath oceans, the stones of that forgotten age remain. And one day, when the right eyes see and the right minds listen, they may finally tell us what our ancestors never stopped trying to say. In the silent halls of the world's ancient ruins, a quiet rhythm hums beneath the stone: geometry, alignment, and code. The more we look, the clearer it becomes. Humanity's earliest civilizations did not emerge in isolation, but as variations of a forgotten pattern. Across continents divided by oceans, they built with the same logic, revered the same stars, and spoke through the same enduring symbols. It is as though each culture inherited pages torn from the same book, written long before the dawn of recorded history. Modern archaeology explains these similarities as coincidence, or the product of parallel development. It is comforting to believe that humans, wherever they lived, simply converged on the same ideas out of necessity. But geometry is not born of coincidence, it is inherited. How did distant peoples, with no supposed contact, build monuments aligned to the solstices, to Orion, to the Pleiades? How did they measure the Earth's circumference, encode pi and phi into their architecture, and embed cosmic ratios in stone before the invention of writing? These were not isolated sparks of genius, they were the embers of something older. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid stands as a cosmic instrument, its base encoding the ratio of the Earth's circumference to its polar radius. Thousands of miles away, at Teotihuacan in Mexico, the layout of the Avenue of the Dead mirrors the same celestial logic, each pyramid positioned according to planetary distances. In Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the desert in vast geometric precision, visible only from the sky, pointing toward celestial rising points. Meanwhile, in Cambodia, Angkor Wat's towers map the movement of Venus with astronomical fidelity. What hand, what memory, what forgotten teacher united these expressions of the heavens across millennia? Perhaps the connection was not physical, but mnemonic. If survivors of a lost civilization carried fragments of knowledge to scattered lands, they may have encoded that wisdom in sacred architecture, ritual, myth, and proportion, as a way of preserving it through time. The language of stone became the bridge between epochs. Temples, Pyramids and megaliths were not merely places of worship, they were messages, machines for remembering, each aligned to the cosmos to ensure that future generations would rediscover their meaning when the world was ready again. The symbols themselves form a network older than any empire. The spiral, found carved into rocks in Ireland, the American Southwest, and New Zealand, reflects the motion of galaxies and hurricanes, of cycles within cycles. The serpent, a creature of rebirth and hidden power, slithers through myths from Egypt to Mesoamerica, representing energy, knowledge, and transformation, the undying memory of the serpent wisdom, said to predate history. Even the sacred tree, from the Sumerian Hulupu to the Norse Yggdrasil, mirrors the axis mundi, the world axis around which the heavens appear to turn. Each symbol is a whisper from a deeper language, the vocabulary of a civilization that thought not in centuries, but in epochs. The connections are not limited to mythology or geometry. Genetic studies reveal that humanity's migrations during the late Ice Age were far more complex than once believed. Ocean currents, prevailing winds, and navigational patterns suggest that early mariners could have crossed vast distances long before the first known ships. Recent discoveries of ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis map, depict Antarctic coastlines before they were covered in ice, suggesting the cartographers drew from far older sources. The implication is startling: advanced knowledge, cartographic, astronomical, and mathematical, may have survived from a world now lost beneath the sea. If these scattered fragments were once part of a unified whole, then our understanding of human history is the story of its disassembly. Each culture became a guardian of a single shard. Egypt held the geometry. The Maya preserved the calendar. India remembered the cosmic cycles. The Celts guarded the sacred alignment of earth and sky. Like the pieces of a great mosaic, they form a pattern only visible when viewed together. And when we finally see it, we begin to realize, it is not a story of progress, but of recovery. The arrogance of modernity blinds us to this continuity. We see ourselves as the apex of evolution, yet our ancestors may have known truths we are only now rediscovering through science. Quantum physics hints at what mystics once intuited. Chaos theory echoes ancient understandings of cycles and renewal. Perhaps the ancients did not worship the stars, they understood them. Perhaps their temples were not shrines, but instruments of cosmic harmony, resonating with frequencies of earth and sky to mark time, harvests, and even the turning of ages. And if so, then humanity is not simply remembering the past, we are being remembered by it. The stones themselves seem to call us back, their alignments waking something dormant within our collective mind. We feel it when we stand before the pyramids, when we walk among megaliths under the stars, when we look up and sense that our ancestors once understood the language of the cosmos more fluently than we do now. The web of forgotten knowledge stretches still across our world, and through it hangs a single, ancient truth: we have been here before. Science, when freed from the boundaries of convention, is an act of remembering. For beneath our feet lies a record that no scribe could forge, no myth could exaggerate, a geological archive of cataclysms, floods, and civilizations erased. In the past few decades, discoveries buried beneath stone, sand, and sea have begun to whisper an unsettling message: our story may not begin in the cradle of Mesopotamia but in the shadows of an age long forgotten, one whose bones still lie entombed beneath layers of sediment and disbelief. The archaeological anomalies are scattered across the globe like fragments of a shattered mirror. Off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Kambat, sonar scans revealed the outlines of immense structures, grids, walls, and foundations, now submerged under 70 feet of water. Carbon samples from the site date to over 9,000 years old, predating the Indus Valley civilization by millennia. In Japan's Yonaguni Monument, massive step terraces and corridors plunge into the ocean depths, their symmetry and right angles hinting at deliberate construction. Skeptics call them natural formations, but even erosion must obey physics, and these formations, eerily consistent in proportion, suggest the hand of design. Elsewhere, on the Andean Altiplano, the site of Tiwanaku defies chronology. Its temple walls are carved with precision that modern engineers still marvel at, interlocking blocks of andesite, cut with laser-like perfection. Geological evidence suggests Tiwanaku may have been active long before the accepted date, possibly during a period when Lake Titicaca's shoreline stood at a different elevation, implying a great upheaval of the earth itself. How could a primitive culture accomplish such architectural mastery in an age when bronze tools did not yet exist? Then there are the maps, the forbidden cartographies of a forgotten world. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, accurately depicts the coastline of Antarctica, without its ice. Modern sonar mapping confirms that the continent's subglacial features match what is shown on that parchment. How could a map from the age of exploration include details only visible through 20th century technology? Its creator admitted he had copied older sources, charts from ancient times, that predate known history. Other maps, the Orontius Phineas and Bosch maps, echo the same impossible knowledge, coastlines, mountain ranges, and rivers that existed before the last ice age ended. Geologists, too, have stumbled upon clues that defy the established timeline. In South Africa, mysterious spherical artifacts known as Klerksdorp spheres, some with perfectly etched grooves, have been found in rock strata billions of years old. While their origins remain debated, their existence challenges our understanding of deep time and human presence. Likewise, Baalbek's trilithon stones in Lebanon weigh over 1,000 tons each, far exceeding the capacity of known ancient lifting technology. They rest upon older, even larger foundation stones, as though an earlier civilization, stronger and more capable, once worked the site before being replaced by those we remember. Each anomaly, taken alone, can be explained away, a geological oddity here, a cartographic error there. But together, they form a mosaic too coherent to ignore. They tell of a civilization advanced enough to map the world, to build with precision, to understand celestial geometry, and then to vanish almost without trace. The sands of time have not erased it completely, they have merely hidden its bones beneath the shifting continents and rising seas. Perhaps the greatest evidence of all lies not in stone or steel, but in the sudden eruption of civilization that followed the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Around 11,600 BCE, exactly when the Earth emerged from that icy chaos, agriculture, architecture, and astronomy all appeared seemingly overnight. Göbekli Tepe rose from the Anatolian plateau, already monumental, already symbolic, as if those who built it remembered something they had once mastered. It is as though the survivors of that lost age, scattered and scarred, begin to rebuild, not from invention, but recollection. Yet academia resists this possibility, clinging to its linear model of progress. To suggest that an advanced culture once thrived before history began is to threaten the foundations of modern identity. For if civilization has risen before, it means we are not ascending a mountain of knowledge, but circling it, forgetting, rediscovering, and forgetting again. The arrogance of the present blinds us to the wisdom of the past, and so the cycle continues, as it has for ages. Still, the earth remembers. Every coastline, every buried ruin, every star-lined temple is a page in the book of our forgotten dawn. And now, as technology pierces the depths of ocean and desert alike, those pages are beginning to turn once more. The past is not dead, it sleeps, waiting for us to remember. The end did not come slowly. It came in fire. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth's serenity was shattered. A sudden shock rippled through the climate record, carved into ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica like scars across the planet's memory. Temperatures plunged, megafauna perished, and vast fields of blackened soot settled across continents. Something catastrophic had struck, not a myth, but an event so profound that it reset civilization itself. And though modern science hesitates to name it, the echoes in ancient myth leave little room for doubt. Humanity once looked to the heavens in terror as the sky fell upon them. Evidence for this apocalypse hides in the sediments of the world. Across North America and Europe, a thin layer of nanodiamonds, iridium, and melted glass spherules marks a singular moment in time. These are the fingerprints of a cosmic impact, the remains of a comet or fragments thereof that detonated over the ice sheets, igniting wildfires that turned forests into smoke and sky into ash. The earth burned, rivers boiled, an entire species vanished. It was as though the planet itself convulsed in memory of the destruction that had come before. This is the event modern geologists call the Younger Dryas boundary, a mysterious cold snap that defies explanation by gradual climate theory alone. To many researchers, it was a natural oscillation, a quirk of glacial meltwater disrupting ocean currents. But to others, the rebels, the dreamers, and the heretics, it bears the unmistakable marks of a celestial disaster. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, once dismissed as fringe, has gathered mounting evidence. Layers of platinum in Greenland, glass-like, trinitite, from Pennsylvania, and carbon-rich soot in the Carolinas, all deposited simultaneously across thousands of miles. If this impact occurred, it would have been apocalyptic. Imagine fragments of a shattered comet plunging into Earth's atmosphere, each one a fiery spear. Shockwaves would have leveled forests. Dust would have blotted out the sun. Glacial meltwater, unleashed in torrents, would have drowned coastlines. The survivors would have emerged into a new world, one colder, emptier, and unrecognizable. And yet, somewhere amid that ruin, the human story persisted. The myths that endure from this epoch are uncanny in their precision. In nearly every ancient tradition, there is a tale of fire raining from heaven. The Hopis speak of the fourth world destroyed by a star that fell. In the Mahabharata, the gods unleash weapons, as bright as 1,000 suns. Plato's story of Atlantis, told through Egyptian priests, describes an advanced civilization drowned in a single day and night of fire and flood around the same time the Younger Dryas began. Coincidence, or memory? If these are fragments of eyewitness accounts, passed down in the language of gods and demons, then humanity's myths are not fantasy but encoded history. They tell of a civilization humbled by the cosmos, one that saw the sky's fury firsthand and vowed never to forget. But memory decays with generations. What began as record became parable, what was fact became faith. The survivors' descendants no longer knew the science of what had happened, only the fear. They built temples aligned with the stars not out of worship, but remembrance. It is possible, perhaps likely, that the people who built Göbekli Tepe and its contemporaries were the children of cataclysm. Their ancestors had seen the heavens fall and the seas rise, and so they built monuments to track the sky. The alignment of those megaliths to constellations such as Orion, Cygnus, and Scorpio may have been a warning, not a celebration, a celestial calendar marking the positions of the stars at the time of their world's destruction. Some researchers have suggested that Göbekli Tepe's carvings, of animals, flames, and falling spheres, depict a comet shower that struck the Earth. If so, those stones are not temples at all, but time capsules from the moment civilization nearly died. The implications are staggering. Humanity's earliest monuments may have been erected not at the dawn of civilization, but in its twilight, built by survivors desperate to preserve memory against the tide of forgetting. Each alignment, each glyph, was a plea to the future: remember what happened. Watch the skies. In the centuries that followed, the trauma of the impact would fade into allegory. Flood myths replaced fire myths. Gods replaced ancestors. The earth healed, but memory did not. Humanity rose again, unaware that it was not the first to do so. The sands buried the evidence, the seas swallowed the rest. All that remained were stories, half-truths told around fires, describing gods who burned the world and waters that cleansed it. But in the quiet of the stars, the warning still lingers. The cosmos that destroyed our ancestors has not changed. The same rivers of ice and fire still cross our solar system, indifferent to memory. Perhaps that is the lesson of the cataclysm, that we are not the masters of this world, only its temporary inheritors. And if our forgotten ancestors once looked up and saw their doom falling from the sky, then perhaps their monuments, carved in stone, aligned with the heavens, were not built to glorify gods. They were built to warn us. When the skies cleared and the last embers of the great fires dimmed, the world that emerged was not the one that had been lost. The glacier had retreated, coastlines had shifted, and the remnants of humanity, small tribes scattered across continents, stood upon a scarred earth, surrounded by the bones of giants. Mammoths, mastodons, and saber-toothed cats had vanished. The forests were gone. Rivers ran wild and new lakes glistened where cities once stood. The survivors faced not only hunger and cold, but a deeper loss, the loss of memory itself. Those who endured the cataclysm must have felt as if the gods had abandoned them. The technological and architectural achievements of their ancestors, whatever they had been, were now myth. And yet, fragments of that lost world endured like embers beneath ash. In the centuries that followed, humanity began to rebuild, but the sparks that reignited civilization did not come from ignorance. They came from recollection. The earliest signs of this rebirth appeared like constellations flickering back into the night sky. In the fertile valleys of the Middle East, people began to farm, domesticating wheat and barley along the Tigris and Euphrates. On the banks of the Nile, they learned to harness the river's cycles, planting by the rhythm of the stars. Across the plains of Anatolia, they built settlements like Catalhoyuk, adorned with murals and shrines that spoke of a culture already rich in symbolism. In South America, on the Altiplano near Lake Titicaca, villages began aligning their temples with solstices and equinoxes. The same was true in the Indus Valley and along the Yellow River of China. Agriculture, architecture, astronomy, all emerged everywhere, almost simultaneously, as if humanity had remembered how to be human again. This explosion of knowledge around 10,000 BCE is known to archaeologists as the Neolithic Revolution, the point when humans shifted from hunting to farming, from wandering to building. But its suddenness remains one of history's great mysteries. How did primitive nomads, scattered and traumatized by disaster, suddenly grasp the intricacies of seed cultivation, irrigation, animal husbandry, and celestial timing? These were not instincts, they were legacies. knowledge rediscovered rather than invented. Somewhere, the memory keepers had endured. The survivors of the pre-flood civilization, those who had preserved fragments of geometry, astronomy, and engineering, must have carried their wisdom across continents, teaching new generations who no longer understood its origins. These teachers became the first sages, remembered later as gods and kings. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, those who came from above. The Egyptians spoke of Thoth and Osiris, bearers of divine knowledge. The Dogon of Mali told of Nommo, who descended from the heavens to restore order after a flood. In the Andes, Viracocha appeared from the waters to teach the people civilization. Though separated by oceans, the story is the same: a stranger from the sea brings the spark of knowledge. If one traces these myths not as fables but as oral histories, a pattern emerges, a map of transmission. Civilization did not rise independently in each region, but spread outward like ripples from an unseen center. The survivors of the lost world, perhaps sailors, astronomers, builders, became wanderers, carrying the seeds of rebirth. Wherever they went, they taught the measurement of time, the cultivation of food, the alignment of temples with the stars. They were the bridge between two worlds, the world before the flood and the one reborn after it. And yet, with each passing generation, their knowledge became diluted. What was once mathematics became religion. What was once science became ritual. The builders of Göbekli Tepe, who encoded astronomical alignments in stone, were likely the last to truly remember. When they finally buried their temple around 9000 BCE, entombing it deliberately, as if to preserve it, they may have known that their age of remembrance was ending. The world was changing again. The ice had melted, the seas had risen, and the memory of the old world was sinking beneath waves of new ignorance. By the time Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley civilizations arose thousands of years later, their founders spoke of golden ages long past. Kings claimed descent from gods, not to boast, but because somewhere in their lineage, someone truly had been descended from the remnants of that lost civilization. The temples of Memphis, the ziggurats of Ur, and the citadels of Harappa were not beginnings, they were echoes. And so humanity's second dawn began, bright, proud, and yet already haunted by the shadows of the first. For in rebuilding, we carried with us both the memory of greatness and the fear of loss. The monuments of the ancient world, pyramids, temples, and observatories, were not simply expressions of faith, but anchors for memory. They tethered humankind to the stars, ensuring that we would never forget the heavens that once destroyed us, and the heavens that might yet save us. But even in this new world, whispers of the old persisted. Hidden knowledge, secret brotherhoods, ancient symbols, all carried the faint echo of an earlier wisdom. Those who sought to preserve it became the stewards of memory, the keepers of forgotten truths. They built in stone so that time could not erase what words could not hold. They watched the skies, waiting for the cycle to turn again. For as the ancients knew, time is not a line, it is a wheel. And wheels always come back around. By the time the first cities glimmered along the Tigris and Nile, the survivors' descendants had forgotten their ancestors' faces, but not their symbols. The circle, the cross, the serpent, and the star, these became the sacred glyphs of rebirth, woven into the heart of humanity's second awakening. What began as memory had become mythology, and what was once science had become sacred. The world was rebuilding itself, not from invention, but from fragments of a deeper inheritance encoded in faith, architecture, and the heavens themselves. In Mesopotamia, the people of Sumer declared that the black-headed ones had been taught civilization by divine beings known as the Anunnaki, who descended from the sky to give them writing, law, and kingship. In Egypt, the followers of Thoth recorded cycles of time stretching back tens of thousands of years before the reign of the pharaohs, ages they called Septepi, the first time. In the Indus Valley, complex city grids and drainage systems appeared seemingly without precedent, as though planned by engineers who remembered how cities were once built. Across the Atlantic, in the Americas, the Olmecs, Maya, and Inca gazed at the same stars and told the same story, gods who came from the seed-bearing knowledge. What unites these distant peoples is not language or blood, but geometry. The dimensions of their temples, the orientation of their monuments, and the mathematics of their calendars all point skyward. They encoded the precession of the equinoxes, the cycle of Venus, and the ratio of the Earth's circumference, all long before modern instruments could measure them. This obsession with the heavens was not mere superstition. It was a remembrance of loss. To know the sky was to guard against the return of the catastrophe that had once come from it. At the core of this reborn world stood astronomer priests, the first scientists, though cloaked in ritual and secrecy. In Sumer they became the Magi, in Egypt the Heliopolitan priests, in India the Rishis. They watched the movements of the stars with both reverence and fear, calculating solstices and equinoxes, predicting eclipses, and aligning temples to mirror the constellations. The Great Pyramid of Egypt was not a tomb but a cosmic instrument, its shafts aimed precisely at Orion and Sirius, reminders of celestial origins and warnings of celestial return. To the uninitiated, these priests appeared as mediators between mortals and gods. But perhaps, in truth, they were mediators between past and future, guardians of what little knowledge had survived the flood. Their sacred texts, encoded in myth, held astronomical truths disguised as divine revelation. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, speaks of a flood that destroyed the world, while hidden within its structure lies a calendar of celestial cycles. The Vedas describe gods wielding thunderbolts, yet the descriptions mirror plasma phenomena now studied in astrophysics. The Mayan Popol Vuh recounts the fall of fiery stones and the reshaping of the earth, cosmic metaphors rooted in memory, not fantasy. And so the temples became textbooks in stone. Every pyramid, ziggurat, and observatory was an archive, an attempt to preserve cosmic understanding through architecture. Their alignment with the heavens was not for worship but for calibration. The ancients sought to synchronize themselves with the Earth's celestial rhythm, believing that harmony with the cosmos was both protection and purpose. The priests were astronomers, but also alarm keepers, watching the heavens for signs that the great cycle of destruction might begin again. Yet even this wisdom could not withstand time's erosion. As dynasties rose and fell, the sacred sciences became tools of power. Knowledge that once united humanity began to divide it. The priesthoods became exclusive, their symbols esoteric, their language obscured. The geometry of the cosmos transformed into the geometry of empire. The divine right of kings replaced the birthright of all humanity, to know, to remember, to build. Still, the memory persisted in hidden forms. In Greece, philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato revived whispers of ancient truths, the music of the spheres, the cycles of destruction and renewal. In Egypt, the Hermetic texts spoke of an age before the flood, when mankind walked among gods of knowledge. In Mesoamerica, the Maya recorded in codices the count of the long calendar, spanning millennia, as if to mark when the cycle might close again. These were not coincidences. They were echoes, resonances of the same ancient vibration humming beneath the surface of human history. As the new civilizations grew in grandeur, they believed themselves the first and greatest. Yet deep within their myths, they all shared a shadow, the knowledge that greatness is temporary, that the gods themselves can die, that the world turns upon itself in cycles of light and darkness. The Egyptians called this cycle Zep-Tepi, the Hindus named it the Yugas, and the Maya the suns. Each described the same cosmic wheel, the rise and fall of ages, the birth and death of civilizations, the remembering and forgetting of humankind. This was the second dawn, the rebirth of humanity from its own ashes. But beneath its brilliance lay a quiet warning. For just as the survivors of the first civilization once watched their skies, so too did these new builders look upward, knowing that memory fades, and that history, like the heavens, always repeats. As the great empires of Egypt, Sumer, and the Indus Valley reached their zenith, the light of ancient memory began to flicker. Kings turned divine, temples became bureaucracies, and science, once sacred, was imprisoned within walls of secrecy. Yet across the world, in the shadow of palaces and pyramids, small groups of initiates labored to preserve what little of the old wisdom remained. They were the keepers of the hidden flame, sworn to guard humanity's memory through the coming darkness. Their methods were subtle, their symbols deliberate. Knowledge that once illuminated the world now had to be hidden in plain sight. Geometry became architecture. Astronomy became religion. The truths of number and proportion were cloaked beneath parable and allegory. To those without eyes to see, it was mysticism, but to those initiated, it was survival. For memory had become dangerous. In a world ruled by kings and gods, knowledge was power, and power could not be shared. The first of these orders arose in the temples of Egypt. The House of Life at Heliopolis and the mystery schools of Abydos taught initiates in sacred geometry, star cycles, and the hidden harmonies of the cosmos. Their teachings, later echoed in Greek philosophy, spoke of the unity between man, earth, and the stars. As above, so below, they said, not as metaphor, but as law. The Hermeticists who followed in later centuries would claim this wisdom came from Thoth himself, known to the Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great teacher of lost ages. In Greece, the echo continued. Pythagoras, who studied in Egypt and Babylon, founded his brotherhood on the principles of sacred number and proportion, the same constants once carved into the megaliths of the first civilization. To him, the universe was music, and every planet sang in mathematical harmony. Plato, his successor in spirit, hinted that his philosophy was but a dim reflection of a far older truth. In Timaeus, he wrote of Atlantis, a civilization destroyed by flood and fire, whose remnants seeded the world's wisdom. Few understood that Plato was not speaking in myth, but memory. Across the sea, the same pattern unfolded. The Druids of ancient Britain, though dismissed as mystics, built temples aligned to solstices and equinoxes with the precision of astronomers. The layout of Stonehenge, with its lunar and solar alignments, mirrors the principles found in Egypt and Sumer. Even in the Americas, the priests of the Maya and the astronomers of Chichen Itza carried on the same vigilance, measuring, calculating, watching the heavens for signs that the cycle might begin again. It was not coincidence. It was continuity. The same seed of remembrance had taken root across the world, nurtured in secrecy by those who knew the cost of forgetting. Their societies often hid behind myth, the Brotherhood of the Serpent, the School of the Magi, the Mystery of Osiris, the Orphic Mysteries, and later the Gnostic orders. Each traced their lineage to a time before time, claiming to guard truths from the first world. In whispered rites, they taught the initiates how to read the symbols, the serpent as wisdom, the spiral as rebirth, the star as origin. When the ancient empires fell, Egypt to Persia, Greece to Rome, and Rome to its own corruption, the initiates adapted. Their wisdom flowed underground, preserved through the Hermetic texts, the Emerald Tablet, and the secret doctrines of the alchemists. They knew that memory, once lost, could only be preserved through metaphor. The philosopher's stone, they said, was not gold, but enlightenment, the rediscovery of humanity's forgotten origins. In every age, they reappeared under new names: the Builders, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. Their rituals echoed the geometry of the stars, their lodges aligned to solstices, their symbols inherited from the temples of Abydos and Heliopolis. Though centuries apart, their purpose remained the same: to ensure that the flame of memory, however dim, never went out completely. To modern eyes, these secret orders seem like curiosities, relics of superstition. But look closely, and their symbols form a map. The compass and square of the Masons mirror the cosmic axis. The all-seeing eye atop the pyramid is the Eye of Horus, the awakened memory of the first civilization. Even the Latin mottos of medieval brotherhoods whisper of cyclical time and rebirth. Their architects built cathedrals not merely for worship, but as resonant instruments of sacred proportion. The great rose windows of Europe were mandalas, diagrams of the cosmos. By the dawn of the classical age, the sacred science of the ancients had become legend, its fragments scattered through philosophy, myth, and esoteric ritual. Yet through all of it, the same message endures: that humanity has lived before, that it will live again, and that knowledge, true knowledge, is the bridge between eras. We are the children of those who refuse to let the fire die. Every temple, every compass, every myth that hints at hidden wisdom is a spark from that eternal flame, passed hand to hand through darkness. And though we have forgotten their names, the keepers still whisper through our architecture, our symbols, our stories. They wait for the next awakening, when memory stirs, and the veil of amnesia lifts once more. For millennia, the flame of the ancient world burned low, hidden behind symbols and secret brotherhoods, its light dimmed but never extinguished. Then, as if stirred by some cosmic clock, humanity began to remember. The Renaissance dawned like a second sunrise, the long sleep of the Dark Ages lifting to reveal a world ready to rediscover its own forgotten genius. But what we call progress may, in truth, have been something deeper: remembrance. In Florence and Alexandria, scholars pored over newly recovered Hermetic texts, translations of the Corpus Hermeticum, said to contain the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the same god of wisdom who once walked the halls of Heliopolis. These writings proclaimed that the universe was a living being, that man was a reflection of the cosmos, and that the soul could ascend through knowledge. To the thinkers of the Renaissance, these were revelations; to the ancient initiates, they were reminders. The flame had flickered back to life. The rebirth of science was no accident. It was the reawakening of the old ways in new language. Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton all studied Hermetic philosophy. Kepler described the cosmos as a harmonic system, the music of the spheres. Newton, often remembered only for physics, filled his private journals with alchemical diagrams and secret experiments on the transmutation of matter and spirit. These men were not inventing a new science, they were translating an ancient one. The geometry of the heavens, the ratios of nature, the secret harmony between microcosm and macrocosm, these were the truths the ancients had once carved into stone. The 18th and 19th centuries brought new layers of revelation. Explorers rediscovered Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. Beneath the sand and jungle, the bones of the forgotten ages stirred again. The hieroglyphs of Egypt, once thought gibberish, began to speak. Ziggurats re-emerged from beneath the soil, and the first archaeologists stood before the ruins of Troy and Nineveh, realizing that myth was history misremembered. Each discovery chipped away at the arrogance of modern certainty, whispering the same truth the ancients knew: the past is not dead, it sleeps. Then came the modern age, and with it, a new form of remembering. As technology advanced, so too did our gaze turn upward again. The same stars that the priests of Sumer and Egypt had tracked became subjects of telescopes and satellites. We mapped the cosmos, found new worlds, and discovered that the universe itself was ancient beyond comprehension. The great paradox of modernity is that the deeper science peers into the cosmos, the more it begins to sound like the mystics of old. Quantum physics speaks of unity, vibration, and consciousness, concepts the ancients once held as sacred truths. Even now, new discoveries continue to challenge the linear story of civilization. The temples of Göbekli Tepe, older than the pyramids, rewrite history itself. The Sphinx, weathered by water, hints at an age of rain that Egypt has not seen for 10,000 years. Advanced toll marks found on megaliths in Peru and Lebanon defy the known capacities of Bronze Age peoples. Beneath the seas, sonar maps reveal lost coastlines, structures, and roads that once stood upon dry land. Bit by bit, the amnesia is lifting. Yet, humanity resists remembering. To accept that we are a species reborn from the ashes of a forgotten world requires humility. It demands that we abandon the comforting myth of progress and admit that knowledge rises and falls like tides. We may be rediscovering truths our ancestors already knew, that consciousness itself shapes reality, that time is cyclical, and that humanity is part of a cosmic rhythm far older than history. Still, there are those who feel it. Artists, scientists, dreamers, all sense the pulse of remembrance returning. The sacred geometry reappears in architecture, in music, in mathematics. The pattern reasserts itself, like DNA repairing after damage. Every generation that looks to the stars, every mind that wonders where we came from, is participating in the slow awakening of the species. The veil thins, and through it, we glimpse the fires of our first dawn reflected in the glass of modern telescopes. Perhaps this is what the ancient orders waited for, not power, but understanding. The cycles turn, the ages repeat, and once again humanity stands at a threshold. As we split the atom, harness the sun, and reach toward the stars, we are replaying an old melody, one we first learned in a world that was washed away. The question now is not whether we will remember, but whether we will learn. For every forgotten civilization before us, remembrance came too late. If we are indeed the inheritors of a broken lineage, then the task of our age is not only discovery, but reconciliation, with our planet, with the cosmos, and with the long, cyclical memory of humanity itself. And somewhere, buried in stone and silence, the ancients wait, watching, as we awaken to who we once were. Civilization, like the heavens it studies, moves in cycles. The ancients knew this. They watched the sky not as passive observers but as witnesses to a cosmic rhythm, an eternal heartbeat in which worlds rise, flourish, and fall. To them, time was not a straight line but a wheel, endlessly revolving. The great epochs, the yugas of India, the ages of man of Greece, the sons of the Maya, all spoke of repeating cycles, each one ending in renewal through catastrophe. And as our modern world spins faster, louder, and more blind to consequence, one cannot help but wonder if we are nearing the end of yet another turn. In the Vedic texts, time unfolds through vast epochs. The Satya Yuga, the age of truth, gives way to the Treta, the Dvapara, and finally the Kali Yuga, an age of confusion, materialism, and forgetting. The ancients believed that each cycle ends in fire, flood, or upheaval, cleansing the world before the next dawn. Plato's Atlantis, too, met its end in a single night of destruction. The Hopi foretold that the fourth world would perish by the shaking of the earth. To modern ears, these sound like myths, but our planet's geological record tells the same story in its own language: layers of ash, craters, and sudden extinctions. The evidence of previous endings lies beneath our very feet. Today, we stand again at the edge of vast uncertainty. The ice retreats, the climate shifts, the earth trembles more violently. Firestorms rage, seas rise, and species vanish. Satellites capture these changes from orbit, their data spelling out in numbers what the ancients once wrote in prophecy. Whether by cosmic coincidence or self-inflicted hubris, we are repeating the same pattern, the overreach of a civilization that believes itself immortal. The ancients would have recognized this moment. They would have called it the forgetting before the fall. Yet within this looming shadow, something else stirs, the same whisper that rose from the ashes of the last age. Scientists begin to see unity in chaos, patterns in climate, cycles in solar activity, resonances in the fabric of space itself. The mystic and the physicist, long estranged, begin to speak a common language again. Quantum mechanics hums with the same truths Hermeticism once taught, that reality is not solid but vibrational, that consciousness may be fundamental, and that all things are connected by unseen geometry. It is as if the old flame, the one carried through temples, buried in myths, and coded into cathedrals, has found its spark once more. The keepers of memory, too, have reawakened. Though their ancient brotherhoods have faded, their work continues in new forms: scientists, archaeologists, and philosophers who question the established timeline of humanity. Their discoveries are peeling back the layers of dogma, revealing a more complex and cyclical history. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe, the star-mapped pyramids, the submerged cities of Dwarka and Bimini, each is a fragment of the same forgotten sentence. Together they tell us that civilization did not begin once, but many times. It may be that this remembering is no accident. Perhaps every cycle has its awakening, its moment when humanity begins to see beyond the illusion of permanence. The ancients left messages not to scare us, but to prepare us. Their myths of floods and fires were not prophecies of punishment, but reminders that all creation must renew itself through destruction. Just as stars die to birth new light, civilizations must fall to clear the ground for what comes next. We are not the victims of the cycle, we are its continuation. Still, the ancients warned that survival depends on remembrance. To forget is to repeat without understanding. The lost world before the flood may have perished not from ignorance, but from pride, from believing itself untouchable, from tampering with forces it did not respect. We stand in similar arrogance today, commanding the atom, the genome, and the climate with the same blindness. The ancients built their monuments to endure the flood. Our monuments are digital, fleeting, and fragile. What will remain of us if the wheel turns once more? Yet hope endures. The same creative spark that survived the last cataclysm burns in us still. We are the descendants of survivors, the carriers of a memory older than language. Each time the cycle resets, humanity rises from the ashes with a little more awareness, a little more compassion, a little closer to harmony with the cosmos. Perhaps that is the true purpose of these endless turns, to refine the soul of our species through trial, until we remember what we were meant to be. So as the stars wheel overhead and the earth trembles beneath our feet, the question is not whether the cycle will turn, but whether we will meet it with wisdom or amnesia. The ancients left us the tools, the geometry of the heavens, the rhythm of nature, the humility to see ourselves as part of something vast and eternal. If we heed them, we may yet pass through the fire unburned. For the wheel is turning again, and the memory of the first dawn is stirring. It calls to us, to remember before it's too late. The night before the dawn is always the darkest. Humanity now stands in that twilight, a world of dazzling technology and profound forgetfulness, of instant connection and deep disconnection. We have conquered matter but lost touch with meaning. We have split the atom, mapped the genome, and peered into the quantum heart of creation, yet we struggle to recall what our ancestors once knew instinctively, that we are not apart from the universe, we are of it. And so, as the great wheel turns once more, the ancient rhythm begins to echo within us. The long sleep of amnesia is ending. When the next dawn comes, it will not be born in a single place or through a single prophet. It will awaken within countless minds at once, a rising of awareness rather than empire. Just as the flood once washed away the world of stone, this renewal will wash away illusion. Already, we see its first glimmers, a growing recognition of unity among science and spirit, a return to the language of pattern, vibration, and harmony. The universe no longer seems a cold machine but a living consciousness. What the ancients called the divine, we now glimpse in the quantum field, in the network of neurons, in the geometry of galaxies. This is not mysticism, it is memory. The ancients who raised the great temples knew what we are relearning, that the structure of the cosmos is the same structure found within us. Every cell, every atom, every star is part of a single unfolding intelligence. The gods of old were not deities of caprice but symbols of cosmic principles, forces of creation, destruction, and rebirth. In forgetting their true nature, we turned them into myths. In remembering, we see that they were mirrors. As the new cycle begins, humanity faces a choice, one that every civilization before us has faced. We can cling to the illusions of separation, power, and control, or we can remember our place within the living tapestry of existence. The ancients built in stone because they knew how fragile memory was. We build in data and light. Our monuments now float in clouds of code. Yet the essence remains the same, to reach upward, to preserve knowledge, to survive the next dawn. The difference lies in whether we rise consciously, with humility, or fall again into ruin and forgetting. But perhaps this time is different. Never before has humanity been so connected, so capable of collective reflection. Never before have we had the tools to see the universe as it truly is, vast, intelligent, interwoven. The myths of the past, once dismissed as superstition, now reveal themselves as encrypted science, the tree of life as DNA, Indra's net as quantum entanglement, the divine spark as consciousness itself. We are the living bridge between the seen and unseen, the culmination of all who came before. The memory of the first civilization, the one washed away by fire and flood, lives in our very DNA, waiting for recognition. The next age will not be measured in empires or technologies but in awareness. The temples of the future will not be built of stone, but of understanding, mathematical, spiritual, harmonic. Humanity will learn again to build in resonance with the earth, to align its structures with the heavens, to treat science as the language of all rather than dominion. In that harmony, we may rediscover what the ancients meant by immortality. Not the survival of the body, but the continuity of consciousness, an awareness that transcends cycles because it remembers them. One day, perhaps far from now, our descendants will stand among the ruins of our cities and wonder who we were. They will see traces of our machines, our satellites, our art, and they will sense that we, too, were remembering something. If we succeed, they will inherit not just our technologies, but our understanding, that humanity is part of a greater story that did not begin with us and will not end with us. If we fail, they will begin again, as the builders of Göbekli Tepe once did, shaping stone to the rhythm of forgotten stars, carrying forward the ember of remembrance through another dark age. Yet there is beauty in the cycle itself. For each turning brings us closer to the truth. The universe dreams through us, learns through us, awakens through us. We are the storytellers of eternity, rediscovering ourselves with every rise and fall. And as the new dawn begins to break, spreading gold across the horizon of time, we may at last understand what the ancients tried to tell us in stone. That we are not the children of chaos, but of memory. That every ending is a beginning. And that the light we seek has always been our own. The sun rises. The world turns. And humanity remembers. The end.